it becomes very difficult to be persuasive in saying it's not about Zuma,
Right.
when it's very clearly about Zuma, and it seems to be that there are concerns that if Zuma is on the ballot, that he will be able to come into parliament. The hypocrisy of the media, that the media was so obsessed with Nkandla, but ignores everything that's happening with Phala Phala and everything else.
Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Slu, and yes, I am with Jamie Mighty. I love how we're matching today.
Yeah.
You know, we tried
The combos are
communicating. Exactly. Let's get straight into it. Let's talk about it. Zuma. He's had another busy week, another interesting week, in fact. Let's get into his victory, because he seems to be on that victory lap.
He is.
The Zuma victory. What are your reflections on the Electoral Court judgment?
Yeah, so the Electoral Court actually ruled that Zuma can be on the ballot. And that was a big win for the Zuma camp, because one of the dynamics that was now a factor is how many people will still support Mkhonto Wesizwe if it's not directly sending through their guy. How much do they trust that Jacob Zuma can control the party and its decisions in parliament from the sideline, almost as a godfather, so to speak? And some people will think, yeah, you can do that, but other people will be concerned because once you're not there, you're not there. So him being able to be in parliament, to orchestrate and lead the group of MPs that he goes in with, will give a lot of people who are looking at him confidence that his vision may be able to be articulated. Any unfinished work that he's speaking about will be able to be delivered. So by challenging this particular issue, and winning the issue, this changes the dynamic of the election somewhat. But obviously we know other things happened. We'll talk about them now. But what Advocate Dalimpofu had argued is, number one, that the remission of the sentence was tantamount to a reduction and the cancellation of the sentence. So while the section in the Constitution says that you cannot be a member of parliament if you have a sentence of over 12 months, if the sentence is then remitted, then the question then becomes, does that count when it comes to you?
So, Jamie, for clarity, just explain what remission is and what does it mean when your sentence has been remitted?
So remission, basically, the technical term, the definition is it's a reduction. So
of a sentence.
Okay. So by remitting by remitting Jacob Zuma's sentence, President Ramaphosa reduced it to the point where the time that was already served then allowed him to be out of prison, which was the 3 months before the parole saga started, right? So if you remit the sentence, it has been reduced.
Okay.
Do you understand? So that was one of the arguments. The second argument was around the electoral rights of Zuma and Mkhonto Wesizwe and South Africans, right? So people have this right to contest in elections. Voters have a right to choose their leader. And the party has a right, obviously, to canvass, organize, and to present its candidates. So one of the arguments that was made was that that becomes a violation of the right. The last argument that was made was that the IEC is not the appropriate arbiter of the issue, in that they don't actually have the power to make that decision, and that is a decision that ought to be made by the National Assembly. And that was one of the arguments. Now, the challenge that we all have is that the judgment, the reasons for the decision, the written reasons have not been released.
Okay.
And we don't actually know what did the Electoral Court rely upon to make their determination from the arguments that were made.
Sure.
Because while Advocate Dalimpofu and Advocate Moses Kakane were arguing these particular points, there were obviously other arguments being made by Advocate Thembelani Waitobi and counsel for the IEC. So when you read a judgment, you're then be able to understand what were the reasons for the decision, the ratio decidendi, and that can help you then make a legal determination as to what's next, helps students understand also where does the court stand, where does the law stand. So as things stand right now, we don't have the written judgment, or at the time that we were recording, that judgment was not out, because there's a time pressure here. The election is in 46 days at the time of our recording. So everything is moving fast.
Very fast.
Any day, any week makes a material change to what happens. So it was a big win for Zuma. And it's definitely something that even the Rand started to worry about. If you saw 2 days after that decision, we started to see that now there are concerns from the currency markets around Jacob Zuma being on the ballot. And because obviously some of the polls that have come out, even though we think they're too high, have shown MK to be at above 10%. I still think that's too high. I think that COPE came in at 7. EFF came in at 6. The new party is going to score round about there or less. I think dynamics have changed since I said those things, though, because of these court cases.
Right.
But we'll talk about that later.
And so following Zuma's case, there were 2 statements that were issued. What are some of the highlights of those statements? Yeah,
so on Friday, we then saw 2 statements come out. The first one came out from the IEC, and we have them right in front of us. We will post some of the text in the video as well. The Commission confirms that it has lodged an urgent and direct appeal to the Constitutional Court relating to the order of the Electoral Court setting aside its decision following the appeal by the MK party. The Commission believes there's a substantial public interest in providing certainty on the proper interpretation of Section 47(1)(e) of the Constitution and its interplay with the powers of the Commission to adjudicate candidates. Such clarity is important in the present matter because of a live issue, but also for future elections. It is furthermore important that such legal clarification is obtained from the highest court in the land, which has constitutional matter jurisdiction, hence a direct appeal to the Constitutional Court. The Commission wishes to emphasize that this appeal is not intended to involve itself in the political field of play. It is rather to ensure free and fair elections by ensuring that applicable constitutional provisions relating to elections are clearly understood by all role players and applied evenly. We therefore wish for the matter to be determined before the date of the election end. That's what
this is what the IEC said.
This is what the IEC said.
Right.
And then not long after, also on the 12th of April,
same day,
the counter statement or the statement for the MK from the MK. MK party calls for immediate resignation of IEC Commissioner Janet Love. Read somewhere else like short.
So it's it says here, after much considerable reflection, MK party condemns Janet Love's conduct and therefore calls for her resignation as Commissioner of the Electoral Commission of South Africa, IEC, with immediate effect for her blatant acts of bias. As MK party, we were prepared to give Miss Love, who has been a loyal serving member of the ANC and a close confidant of President Ramaphosa, the benefit of the doubt. But in light of the above, we have now come to the conclusion that Janet Love is highly vested in the outcomes of the upcoming elections and cannot be trusted to oversee nor be involved in these elections.
There's no love for Janet Love. I saw a shot. I had to take.
Stop.
Keep going. No, don't skip. Go back to the third paragraph.
Yeah. So it goes on to say, in a landmark judgment, the Electoral Court recently sided with the MK party and former President Jacob Zuma, overturning the decision by the IEC that sought to disqualify President Zuma from contesting in the upcoming elections as a candidate for MK party. This verdict not only underscores a defeat against Ramaphosa ANC and all its treacherous allies, but also casts a...
treacherous.
No, I read Shakespeare, so I got that part. But also casts a spotlight on the prejudicial conduct of IEC Commissioner Janet Love. Should I go on?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's just finish maybe that paragraph.
The basis of our legitimate call for her removal is due to her obnoxious behavior on the 24th January 2024, before an objection was lodged regarding the eligibility of President Zuma to participate in the parliamentary elections. Janet Love, in an unprecedented move, publicly declared nationally that President Zuma would not be eligible and couldn't be included in the MK party's parliamentary candidates.
Now I feel like we need to read the next paragraph.
Absolutely. So it goes on to say this pronouncement was not only premature and unwarranted, but also in direct violation of the established IEC rules, which stipulate that such declarations can only be made following an official objection.
Okay, now go here.
So this is the second last part of the statement. This call is further supported by recent events in May 2023 in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, where 4 prominent opposition candidates highlighted Janet Love's controversial involvement in the audit of the DRC's voter registration. These candidates, representing a broad spectrum of DRC's political and civil society, accused Janet Love of legitimizing a flawed electoral process, an accusation that has serious implications for the credibility of any electoral observation or audit she is part of.
It's a lot. We're even called to question if President Ramaphosa has deployed his friend in the form of Janet Love to the DRC as an electoral agent to interfere with the electoral process so as to protect his business interests of his family and funders who own mines in the war-torn DRC. Then they say, should Janet Love fail to resign in the next 7 days, the MK party reserves the right to pursue all available avenues to address this issue, including approaching our courts.
This election season is getting hotter and hotter with each day. And this is a huge concern, I think, for the electorate. But what are some of the highlights for you?
So what we see from this is that, one, the IEC is saying that they want to get this clarity and they want to get it from the Constitutional Court as soon as possible, right? Clarity on proper interpretation of 47.1E and also to get, this resolution quickly before the election happens.
Right.
Now, there's a bit of a challenge here, and I don't know if everyone can see what that challenge is. The challenge is as follows. The Constitutional Court is the court that found Zuma to be in contempt. And they used very harsh language against Jacob Zuma in the majority judgment, which imprisoned him, right? There were 2 judgments, the majority and the dissenting judgment. In the majority judgment, they made a lot of statements about the nature of Jacob Zuma as a person. What that says to me is that there may be a harm here around perceptions of fairness by this particular court.
Right.
Just because of the language that they've used to describe this litigant here, Jacob Zuma. Of course, it's MK party, but it's about Jacob Zuma being on the ballot. And if you go back and you read their judgment, you'll see that the language around Jacob Zuma was very harsh. Then number 2 comes the question of the Chief Justice himself. If you recall, Zuma said, I know this man. And Advocate Moses Kakane said, he knows him. And that's why they are walking out of the State Capture Commission, because there's a conflict, right? And he should recuse himself. He then revealed that he did know Zuma and he had gone into a hotel to have a meeting with him, right? He didn't share the details when he was asked that question by Julius Malema, and we'll play that clip. So I'm just going to put a pause here so that I remember where the clip is, but insert clip.
I'm worried that it becomes very easy for you to descend into the political arena. One is these meetings that you had with President Zuma to discuss politics. 2 is these meetings that you have with ease with President Ramaphosa to discuss this and even go beyond of discussing how he's going to appear and all of that. And anyone who says Ramaphosa's appearance was staged, I'm tempted to agree with them, because you met him before, and then you now have a press conference to engage politicians in public, descending into the arena. Are we going to have a Chief Justice that gets easily available to meet politicians at their own comfort? We don't know what gets to be discussed there, and when we ask, they don't remember. Will that not even put this judiciary in a more crisis than it is now? Because research has been presented here that people are losing confidence in the judiciary. With an ACJ that visits politicians with ease, I mean, I heard others saying it's easy for you to call a minister and all of that. Those things of ministers are insignificant. We're talking presidents here, so we're not talking those ministers, this and that. Presidents, whereas those that are implicated in what you are presiding over. You meet them with ease. You discuss with them with ease. It shouldn't be easy for any judge, that's my view, to be available to meet a politician and shouldn't be easy for any politician to be available to meet any judge unless they are prepared when that matter is exposed to disclose publicly with ease what was the meeting about. I'm living here with discomfort that you are a sitting judge, you met a high-profile politician in a hotel twice. You remember all the details. The only thing that cannot be remembered is what was discussed. I don't think that helps to get you to be the CJ of our country if such small details.
There we go.
There we go. So this also then puts into question the lines between Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, Jacob Zuma, the court itself, on the fact that the thing that excluded Jacob Zuma from being eligible to run again is a creation of this particular court, where the dissenting judges did say this is a violation of his rights. And the judges in and of themselves, in the majority judgment, Kampepe said he does not have precedent for this, that this is a deviation from the normal, because the norm is that if someone is in contempt of court, you issue an order to correct the contempt so that they can appear before that particular forum in the interest of justice to explain that thing. So in the context of the State Capture Commission, the corrective order is to send the coercive order is to send Jacob Zuma back to the State Capture Commission for him to give an account and his version to that commission so that it can fulfill its work which was pitched to everyone as being ultra important, right? But what had been said as they approached the court, they said, well, it's urgent, we need to get the stuff out, etc., etc. But what then happened is that Raymond Zondo took such a long time to release the reports that some of the arguments about urgency over time no longer seem to be as genuine and as pertinent as they did when they were being presented to the Crown Court. But that's what they said, right? So then Kampepe then says, look, we're not going to issue the coercive order for him to appear before the forum where he was in contempt so that we can have the interest of justice. They say, no, we have to protect now the integrity of the courts. The courts are under attack and we are going to do this unprecedented thing. And we're going to assume that this man is not going to do the thing that we tell him. And fast forward. So we're going to skip the process because the process is we coerce you and we send you to the appropriate forum. Then if you don't go to that appropriate forum, then we come with a punitive order, which is imprisonment, you know. But they reversed the process. They sent him straight to jail like it's monopoly. And by doing that, they did violate his rights because he doesn't even have recourse to appeal, right? And typically, if you're going to be convicted of a criminal sentence, there has to be space to appeal. And that's what was said in the dissenting judgment. And in my personal and legal opinion, the dissenting judges were right. Sometimes you lose the vote and it doesn't mean that you're wrong. Sometimes, even in America, the liberal judges will make a ruling on something, they will dissent. But because the court is conservative, they lose. But they don't lose on the merits. They lose because the other side didn't vote with them. And that's why in law, dissenting judgments can be so educational, because over time people can begin to see that, hang on, actually these guys were right even though they lost the votes. Do you understand? And I'm on the side of Chafta J and Theron J in the particular case of Zuma's incarceration. I think that it was wrong to begin with. But going back there to that forum creates problems, you know, of credibility, legitimacy, etc.
Of course.
But that's the one thing that's on the IEC statement. But on the flip side, now talking about what Zuma has said and what the MK has said, they've shown that they're willing to play dirty, to fight every fight. And they're doing that by immediately going for the IEC commissioner. I don't know the relationship that the IEC commissioner has with President Ramaphosa. I don't know if she's an ANC member. I don't know what happened in DRC. I cannot speak to any of that. I don't know if any of those statements are authentic and truthful. However, this kind of stuff drags everything into the mud. It does destroy the credibility of the situation. And if she did say those things, if she did make a prejudgment in January to say Zuma is not eligible, then if she made that proclaiming publicly, it is a prejudgment. It is showing that you are predisposed one direction against a particular candidate. And right now, everyone is trying to make it seem like it's not about Zuma, but it's looking more and more like it is about Zuma. So this may harm the credibility of the election, and it may harm the credibility of the IEC. At all times, the IEC needs to appear to be above the fray. And if you see right now, the former head of the IEC actually said that he doesn't think it's a good idea to have the IEC appeal this. This issue, the legal question, the clarification about the proper interpretation of Section 47.1E could have been done after the election.
It could have been?
National Assembly can take this to the Constitutional Court if they want. If Zuma gets elected, becomes an MP, and the courts deem that he shouldn't be an MP, he can be removed. Right? But to do all of this stuff at this particular point, 46 days away from the election, that does create complications.
True.
It does. And we can't act as if that's not clear. And we can't act as if there's no Zuma factor when we've seen the court case at the Electoral Court first about Umkhonto Wesizwe being on the ballot. That was ANC versus IEC versus MK.
Yes.
Then we saw the High Court in Durban case about the intellectual property.
Yes.
Then now we saw the objection to Jacob Zuma. Now we're on, and then the objection was sustained. Now we saw this appeal at the Electoral Court. They win at the Electoral Court. Now we're seeing an appeal. Now it's going to be case number 5. It becomes very difficult to be persuasive in saying it's not about Zuma,
right,
when it's very clearly about Zuma, and it seems to be that there are concerns that if Zuma is on the ballot, that he will be able to come into parliament and may even come in stronger than coal. So the reason why I said originally I doubted that 10% number, but as these events unfold, even if that number was inflated, it may then become true because you are giving so much attention to Zuma.
That's absolutely
You are showing
true.
the public that there's a fear of Zuma. And what that does, it may make some of the people want to rally towards him, to move towards him, because it seems as if there are people out to get him. If you think about the American example of Donald Trump is facing 4 different trials. But what it has done is it has strengthened his popularity with the right wing in America, because he's saying to these guys, they're out to get me because I'm fighting for you. They're not getting me, they're coming for you. Throw me there.
Yeah.
And
I'm the sacrificial lamb.
And to an extent, this is an argument that Zuma has also made, that the Ramaphosa ANC is coming for me because I was trying to do A, B, C, D. I was trying to get you nuclear power. They're trying to get you IPPs that are connected to their relatives, etc. So that's part of what is happening now. And that may create a stimulus for Umkhonto Wesizwe Party.
If it hasn't already.
Yeah. Because now they're the focus.
And so I guess the question then becomes, do these cases then help or hurt the MK? Considering that it's now in the spotlight. Week after week, it's just MK this, Zuma this. Does this help or hurt them?
I think this is very good for Jacob Zuma. Having all of this litigation, when you have framed yourself as a person who the system is out to get, when you framed yourself as a person who's being blamed for everything wrong, this, I think, helps him quite significantly. And he's happy about this because the court processes in and of themselves are becoming rallying points. They're becoming speech moments for Jacob Zuma. They're becoming moments where you can take photos. He's in court. It's not embarrassing him in any shape or form. It's actually giving credence to what he's already been saying. These people are out to get me. They get a pass for having money in sofas, and everything that I get is scrutinized. They even say that he's never even stolen a needle, and he gets more persecution than somebody who had foreign currency in their sofa that they've never accounted for.
Imali ayifihle kumantrans ekhaya. I-IEC ayisho lutho ngayo. Ayisho lutho. Isukela umuntu ongakaze athathe ngishinality. Ulokuthiwa uJacob Zuma. Ngeke abe khona lapha ya. I-IEC ngenaphi kwezepolitiki. Ngoba bona ukuvotisa thina kuphela. Ukuthi upresident wesizwe kuzoba ubani ayona indaba yabo leyo. Kodwa ngoba babona igama lami uZuma ngeke aqhamuke lapha ya.
Whatever you think about that, whether you think that he took a lot of money in Nkandla, and of course there are public protector reports to that effect that he benefited. The point is that he's making that argument to a favorable voter base that is listening to him, that is also very tired of the Ramaphosa administration because they're not seeing the value of that administration. Unemployment went up, inflation went up, cost of living went up, electricity load shedding went up, water shedding became a feature. So some people remember fondly that Zuma was actually a president where none of those things were a feature. They are now. So whether or not you think they should care about Nkandla, that's besides the point, that they may not care about it.
Right.
And they may view the hypocrisy of the media, that the media was so obsessed with Nkandla, but ignores everything that's happening with Phala Phala and everything else that has been implicated. The media was so concerned to know who is funding Zuma, who are the Guptas, who are these brothers, but they never cared to know who are the donors to the Cyril Ramaphosa 2017 campaign. And they didn't care to leak that information in the way that they leaked the Gupta tapes. So there are people who have this view. And for him to continue to be portrayed, to continue to have these moments where he is in courts, where he is having confrontations with all of these senior politicians, all of these senior, officials like the IEC, etc. That does say to his audience that, hey, man, something's here with this MK party.
Yeah.
Maybe we should give them a chance.
Yeah, maybe we should be with it. And this then leads me to my next question, which is, we've heard about the Ramaphosa ANC and Zuma being at the center of this whole MK case. Could this be a Zuma versus Ramaphosa election? And what's the impact of that?
I think it's becoming Ramaphosa ANC versus MK election gradually because of these fights. Because the more this fight continues to happen, we're in round 4, 5, 6 as we get closer to it. The temperature is only going to go up. And then maybe something happens on the streets. And then this will consume a lot of the energy.
Sure.
And if that happens, I think it does take away from discussions, because as much as there are these disputes between the Ramaphosa side of the ANC and Mkhonto Wesizwe, they definitely have a lot of policies similarity. Zuma is saying that he's still ANC, right? And a lot of the policy preferences of Jacob Zuma would basically be whatever the ANC resolutions have been, because he's saying that they are ANC and they are still about that life. So this is what confuses me about the rand, because the rand is like, oh, we're so worried. I'm like, listen, you know what Zuma stands for, because he was already an ANC guy. You know what the policies are of the ANC.
Sure.
So if markets are concerned about policy certainty, there's no real fluctuation in policy certainty. But at the same time, you can't panic about Zuma. You didn't panic about the riots. You didn't panic about Phala Phala farm gate. You didn't panic about the rising unemployment, the corruption scandals, the rising debt. The rand has been relatively stable. This can't be the thing that makes you panic, right? But if the election becomes about these two ANC entities, or one ANC entity and an offshoot of the ANC under Mkhonto Wesizwe, it takes away from conversations that I think are also important, right? Because if you think about the cost of housing, the availability of housing, it's a big issue for me. Still, a lot of middle-class people are struggling with rent because they're living in these adult-raised accommodations, paying over 10,000 for 2 bedrooms, being treated like children in low-quality spaces. Some people are getting home loans for properties that are not fit for purpose and are beginning to fall apart. And that housing cost is chowing a lot of the disposable income. So instead of the middle class spending, the middle class is already falling behind and falling into debt. There are issues with crime. South Africa, in the World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Index of 2019, ranked 118 out of 141 countries in crime. It was the lowest performing indicator, crime. 118. Overall, the country was at 60. The financial sector was at number 19. So you can see financial sector number 19, crime 118, education 101, right? Some of the lowest performing indices were education, crime, healthcare.
That sounds like warlike conditions.
And in some instances, it does come across that way because some of the murder rates are so high that they begin to enter the territory of murder capitals where there's also like a war zone happening, right? So that's a significant issue. If you think about the number of people that have died in Russia and Ukraine, right, that number is comparable to the number of people who die every year in South Africa from murders, because the number of murders, I think, is about 24,000. We'll put up the number of deaths in Ukraine, the number of murders, so that people can compare on the screen. So just so I know where to put it, it'll go here, right? So that's significant. So if we're not talking about, deindustrialization, if we're not talking about the low education, because it's at 101 out of 141, if we're not talking about housing, if we're not talking about electricity, if we're not talking about water and how that gets resolved at a national level, if we're not talking about the predatory behaviors of insurance companies, the predatory behaviors of banks, if we're not talking about the still very high cost of data, the lack of fiber internet in homes, we're not talking about how to get young people into the digital economy and make sure that they can profit. We're not talking about how to finance small businesses for entrepreneurs and startups coming from communities where they cannot access money from their father and their relatives to start a business. And we're just talking about MK and ANC. A lot gets sidelined if we're not talking about the crisis in Nesbus. You understand? There's a lot going on that needs to be discussed robustly, debated robustly. But when you have a clash of personalities such as this, it can take away from all of those real and in-depth conversations that need to happen. So I do have a concern that in this happening, we lose out on that rich debate. And also, if all that ends up happening is people are choosing between personalities and also between these personalities who are in their later years, it does close out a lot of the debates which are happening in the age group of 28 to 40, which is the bulk of South Africa, and which is the bulk of South Africa, which has children that they're taking care of under the ages of 20. You understand?
Right.
Those parents, those 5 years experience working, 10 years experience working people, it's mostly people between the ages of 25 to 40. Their issues should be driving the democracy conversation, not the issues of old men who have gripes about power dynamics in one party.
It's going to be a very interesting election, I tell you. At some point, Jamie, I'll be honest, I thought we had this figured out. We could look at maybe the top 5 that could potentially go into coalition come the 29th of May. At this point, it's not make sure. It's not make sure, but we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on the story, because Zuma seems like he'll be dominating the headlines in the next couple of weeks.
What Dlamini said. South Africa is a movie. Remember?
It is.
Well, I think South Africa is a movie. We live in a drama. It's a series. Every day you will be shocked by something new. We have even forgotten what shocked us 2 weeks ago. Every day, next week we would have forgotten about Kagiso and all this, because there will be something new.
It is a movie, and I think Dan Coder puts it nicely when he says South Africa is a movie. Welcome to the watch party.